lines walking on 2 legs. Instead of being quadrupedal, walking on 4s, chimpanzees walk on 4s.
When you say it was homologous to 2 chromosomes, is it like 2 different chromosomes on the chimp that forms one?
Yeah. Okay. Because what happened in and you could even leave that as an anthropomorphic too. I'll have to check to find out exactly which chromosome that was. Don't have anything that has ink in it. Okay, is that what have a human chromosome? I don't remember which one it is. But then there's a chimpanzee chromosome. I should check those. There's a chimpanzee chromosome. Matches perfectly. And then another chimpanzee chromosome matches that. Squiggly lines is telomeres. Okay? And so apparently heading toward hominids, there's that chromosome fusion. That's why humans have 2n equals 46 instead of 48. And the ancestral condition is 48 chromosomes, because you find that in gibbons and orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, okay, and all the only hominids isn't there. So what is the big distinction? In fact, how do we know when we find a fossil? A lot of times fossils from Africa might have just only a leg bone, or might have a few vertebrae, might have part of the skull. How can you tell that it walked straight up? Well, this change of this position has had a lot of influences on how our skeleton has had to change, okay? So one thing is the location of a hole at the bottom of the skull called the foramen magnum. Okay, now what the foramen magnum happens to be, it is the opening in the back of the skull in most animals, like a dog, cat, posterior part of the skull, where the nerve cord enters the skull. Okay, that's called the foramen magnum. And that's always obvious. So on a quadrupedal animal, this is on the lower part of the skull, but way posterior. Okay, now as hominids stood up, then there had to be an adjustment as to where that foramen magnum had to be. It had to rotate and move anteriorly. So that foramen magnum is right underneath the skull. Okay? If we had that position like this, you'd be walking around staring at the sky. Okay? And so that's one adjustment. So even if we find a skull, that's all we have. If we have the bottom of the skull, we can tell whether it was bipedal just by the position of the foramen magnum. Okay, so that's one. But also the location of the femur. The femur is the long bone from your hips down to your knees. Okay, now in chimpanzees and other apes who are not habitually, I'll come back here, that are not habitually walking on 2 legs. Gorillas and chimpanzees sometimes do walk on 2 legs, but they're not very graceful and they don't go very far, okay? But with hominids, it was a habitual process, standing on 2 legs. So instead of having the legs straight, the femur going straight from the hip down to the knee in parallel, that in hominids, the femur is slanted toward the midline, okay? Our knees are inward because this balances the body center of gravity, okay? And so that's a distinction that had to happen too. Another change is the shape of the pelvis. Okay, the pelvis is several bones that form this part at the bottom of your backbone, okay, base here. And in apes, the shape of the pelvis, it's very long, okay? Whereas in hominids, it is much shallower and broader. Shallower and broader. This also is related to supporting the weight, center of gravity of an animal that's walking on two legs, okay? which is not the way it is in apes. Another distinction is that unlike apes that have opposable big toe, in other words, they can grab with their hands, they can grab with their feet. They have an opposable toe. But if you're dedicating your feet continuously for supporting your weight and walking, then the foot has to change. And so it had to adapt to losing a opposable toe. You can't grab things with your feet. You can't go home and pick up your fork with your foot and feed yourself. Okay, but the chimpanzee could. And so that, now all of these are, what is the apomorphy here? Bipedalism. Okay, these are all consequences of bipedalism. So I'm not saying that these are apomorphies. To a certain extent they are, but they're sort of related. Okay, another distinction of hominids is in their teeth. The canine teeth are rather very, very short. Okay, now this is a chimpanzee at the dentist, and canines are long. Now, canines are common in all mammals. I already mentioned that in this lineage leading to mammals, that canine teeth is one of the big characteristics of that group. But the canine teeth are used differently, say in a dog, wolf, where they're used to grab and tear meat apart. In primates, these were for fighting, okay? Not for eating, but for fighting, all right? Now, what has happened with hominids, however, is that the canine teeth have shrunk quite a bit, okay? Now, some of the older fossils for canines still stick above the level of the other teeth, but they're still really reduced. Now, since you have long canines, in order to close the mouth, in the opposite jaw, there has to be what is called a simian gap, okay? A space for those teeth to fit together. Well, in hominids, that has disappeared because canines are now short and the simian gap is gone. That is not related to bipedalism, okay? What it's probably related to, and we don't know for sure, is sociality, okay? Instead of fighting to solve problems, early hominids may have had a different system so that fighting was no longer relevant. We don't know that, but that's a possibility.
So is this another apomorphy?
This would be an apomorph, okay?
Did you say space?
What's that?
What was the space called?
The space is called the simian gap. Okay, let me go back. Right here. Simian gap. Okay, now this apomorphy, you could mention it as either reduction in canine teeth or loss of simian gap. They're both quite a bit the same, both related. Okay, so those are the main characteristics of hominids. Okay, so I'm going to go through, I'm not going to talk about all the fossils, just some of the major ones, okay, that have been found. One of the oldest ones, and this is from Africa, in fact almost all of these older ones are from Africa, Sahelanthropus. Okay, this dates back to between 7 and 6.5 million years. So it's most of the aspects of the skull that we don't have a whole lot of. You know, I think there's only 2 specimens that are known. One of them is the skull, which I show up there. Is brain size, cranial capacity, very, very small, not different from the chimpanzee at all. And the canine teeth are relatively long, but the foramen magnum is located in a position that indicated that it was sort of bipedal. Now, the bipedalism may have arisen actually when they still climbed a lot in the trees, because by scampering in a vertical position probably induced it, okay? I don't know, we don't really know a whole lot about it, but still, it does have a simian gap, so it's still reduced compared to others. And the other fossils that are found alongside of it indicated that the environment that it lived in was a forest area. So not open grasslands, but forest. Ardipithecus. This is a genus. There's 2 different species. We don't need to worry about the species. So these are genera, okay? And of course of this, we only have 1 species, but of Ardipithecus, there's 2. And this is from East Africa, Kenya, that area, 4.5 billion years ago. And once again, the teeth, although the canines still jut a little bit above the tooth line, they're still much reduced, okay? And also, it lived in the forest, and it still had, now of this one we do have its feet, okay? And the foot, although was adapted more for walking, it still had a bit of a opposable toe, could still climb. And so it probably was this critter was probably just as comfortable climbing in trees as walking on the ground. We have a lot of the skeleton for it, and so there's no question as to its stature, standing up straight up. It was not a knuckle walker or anything like that. Okay, and in fact, in the literature, a lot of times this is referred to as Ardi. Okay, Ardipithecus.
You said the Ardipithecus did stand up?
It what?
It's the Ardipithecus stood up?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. In fact, bipedalism is something that's suspected in all these. And we're not talking about being half stooped over. You know, they were playing on.
Did you say that the Sahelanthropus also lived in the forest? Did the Sahelanthropus also live in the forest?
Yeah, both of them. Yeah, both of them in forest ground area. And in fact, this here, if you go to UC Berkeley, in the Bioscience building, they have displays. There's a Tyrannosaurus Rex there by the science library, but also they have not the actual specimen, but a replica of the specimen, because the person who found Ardipithecus was Dr. White, who is a paleoanthropologist at UC Berkeley.
How big are usually these like fossils?
Say what?
How big are these fossils?
Oh, they're about 3.5 feet tall. Okay, now for Sahelanthropus, I think is probably that tall. Okay, but Ardipithecus is about like that as well. Okay, they're not real big. They're not real big. And cranial capacity is not much different than that of chimpanzee.
There's like more than one, right? Because like.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's more than one representative. One of the specimens we almost have the whole skeleton. So it's in real good shape. Then, starting also about 4.5 million to 1.5 million in Africa, most of them from South Africa and East Africa, is several species of a genus that we call Australopithecus. Now, these are also brain capacity 1/3 of modern size, so about like a chimpanzee, not too much different. And so we had at least 2 different genera living sympatrically in the same area, okay, in Kenya, East Africa. And furthermore, there's others of Australopithecus that are from South Africa. So some of these were side shows. They're not in the direct lineage to humans, modern humans. They were basically our cousins, and they went extinct. There was one species, a couple of species here. One that's called Australopithecus afarensis. It could possibly be in the lineage for modern humans. And furthermore, they're scattered. You notice here they were around for a long time. But the main thing is that with humans, it wasn't this evolution to humans was not a straight line. There were side branches, and some of those side branches just simply went extinct.
Did you say that those four are human ancestors, or they were?
Well, some of them had to be.
Okay.
Yeah, but which one? Only. We think that Ardipithecus probably is one of the species, and one of these, or 2 of these, that were not contemporaneous. Okay, but or the actual specimens that were in the direct line to humans just may not be there. We don't have them. You know, we can only draw conclusions with what we have. Okay, and we may not have all the fossils. But this is what they look like. Okay, head featured. Now there was another one also in Africa, overlapping time-wise with Australopithecus and the earliest members of our genus Homo, and these are called Paranthropus. And they're completely sideshows. They're not in the direct lineage to modern humans at all. For one thing, they had very thick jaws down here, and they probably have very big teeth. Furthermore, they have this ridge on the top of the skull. It's called a sagittal crest. Don't know if I can spell that correctly. You might check it in the sagittal crest. And we find this today in gorillas, big male gorillas, okay? Because what is the anatomical significance of that is muscles that close the mandible. They are going up the side, and this is where they connect. Okay, so in order to have real powerful, strong jaw muscles, that adds an attachment site for very thick muscles to be able to close the jaw. And so there's several species of these also, still small, okay, not tall at all. And they're still hominids. We have enough of the skull. We know that they walked on 2 legs, okay, but they were did not work with tools or anything like that. They're probably plant eaters based on size of their teeth. Okay, and so this here is another skeleton, famous one of Australopithecus afarensis from Kenya. And notice here the femur, shape of the femur, and also what the pelvis we have there. Another thing I should have mentioned is also what supports bipedalism is also shape of the backbone. Because for a chimpanzee, usually the backbone is nice and smooth, almost straight. Whereas in a hominid, to balance the body, it's sort of sigmoid shaped. And therefore we can tell from the vertebrae whether it was sigmoid shaped or not. And so this here is, and furthermore, also in Kenya, and I think this is about, how old is that? Maybe it's 2 million years or so, there's a track showing footprints, okay? And we believe it was left by Australopithecus afarensis. It was after a ash, because not too far away there was a volcano and ash that became wet, very mushy. But 2 individuals, one was small, one was big, so it's probably an adult and a child. Their tracks are left there. And the imprints of the foot is not too much different than ours, okay? Very close. There's differences. It's not fully like a modern human foot, but it comes very, very close to it. And so, what type of fossil would that be? It's a trace fossil, okay? Trace fossil. Okay. Now, the genus to which we belong, we are pretty certain that it evolved from some Australopithecine ancestor, okay? And this is called Homo. And so the oldest Homo specimen is 2.4 million years old, also from Kenya. And what it isn't so much an anatomical feature, although the skull cranial size is larger. It is larger, but it doesn't come close to modern standards at all. But still, and also the shape of the teeth, especially the molars, are different from Australopithecus. But really what leads to Homo seems to be a behavioral trait, not an anatomical trait. Namely, this is associated with the manufacturing of stone tools. Now, I want to say something about tool making, and I'll probably say more a little bit later on. Tool making is not unique to hominids. And even probably Australopithecines and Ardipithecus still shaped sort of sticks or anything like this. But this here indicates some sort of cognitive ability to foresee what the tool would really turn out like, because it takes special types of skills to be able to take a rock and pound it in a certain way to shape it. Okay, it's a lot more than just peeling the bark off of a stick. All right. So stone tools, very primitive stone tools, are associated in sites where they found homo.
So this will be like grinding stone for like an axe or?
Well, chipping. Yeah, usually not grinding, but chipping. And so they have some sort of stone tools, and probably since the edges of these stone tools, they seem like they're cutting meat. But this guy, the earliest one, was probably not a hunter, and that earliest form is called Homo habilis. So stone tool manufacturing, but also there's changes to the attachment of neck muscles. Now, how can you tell the attachment of neck muscles when you don't have the muscles? Well, because there are grooves and ridges on bones where muscles happen to attach. And judging from the size, shape of those ridges and other features, you can reconstruct what the muscles could have been like. Okay? So adaptations for running. So this involves a foot. Now this comes very close to modern feet. In fact, I think with Homo habilis, the foot is very much like modern. Can't tell them apart. And inner ear is also for balance while running. And so we have these adaptations, and probably also, although we don't have skin, we don't know how hairy they were. I would suggest, this is just my suggestion, is that probably there was also a reduction in the quantity of hair on the body. Why? For sweat glands. Humans have very high amounts of sweat glands in the skin, and that probably supported for running. So they may have, why run? Even though this is for Homo, not so much for Homo habilis, but definitely for the next Homos I'm going to be talking about, this is the case. Because Homo habilis was probably not a hunter. It was probably a scavenger. What evidence do we have for that? At sites where we have material for Homo habilis, there's also the bones of other animals, but not the whole skeleton of other animals. It's usually like the legs or the arms, bones, which is not the best meat. Okay, so looks like that they went out and took material that was left over from a hyena kill or a lion kill, and after the predators got the best pieces, they would pick this up and drag it to their place. Okay, because there's a selected number of bones. It's not like the whole animals are there. That's unlike later Homo specimens, which we know were hunters. Okay, and so Homo habilis. Now, why running? Because when we get into these, Homo erectus, which indeed is a hunter, we know from the stone tools that that's for what they were for, and for cutting meat, and also at places where we find Homo habilis, we find the whole animal, okay, of what they caught. This arose first in Africa. The oldest forms are in Africa. And probably, okay, the relationship of running is they probably chase their animals, their prey, to exhaustion, and then kill them, okay? There's hunter-gatherer societies in South Africa that still do that today, okay? The Kalahari Desert Bushmen. They can run and they follow the antelope until the antelope is exhausted, okay? So these are skulls, okay, that's a Homo habilis. And you notice here that it is quite a bit different than we saw with Australopithecus. This is Homo erectus. And this here. Okay, so this is from about 1.8 million years ago to, we have specimens in Asia up to 400 million years ago. No question that they were probably hunters based on their tools. Their stone tools are far more sophisticated than those of Homo habilis. However, they're still relatively primitive. So they frequently had something that we call an aculeum axe, hand axe, that relatively large, but still like.
I still have a question about how the
because of proportionality of the bones. You can still tell that. Even if you didn't have the whole skeleton, if you have just part of it, you can, based on the size of that portion, you can reconstruct it.
Comparison from others.
Yeah, because it isn't the case that you would have an extremely long bone here and real short bones here. You know, so it's, and they did take into consideration the amount of variation between this bone, but if you only had the humerus, we have a pretty good idea based on modern humans and even chimpanzees, etc., that this has to fall within a certain size. Yeah. So it's, now this one here, this, I think it's called the Tatum child. Based on the teeth, is about 12 years old. Must have fell into a lake, drowned. You have almost a whole skeleton, all the way from the neck down. You know, its skeleton is very much like modern humans, but not the head. Okay, because teeth. One thing is the bones are really thick. Okay, compared to modern humans, and I'll get back to that a little bit later. But this is almost a complete human skeleton. The knees, everything, about 6 foot tall, 12 years old, based on the teeth. 12 years old, and but still the skull is quite unlike modern humans. Okay, now the type of tool cultures that the Homo erectus made is usually termed Acheulean. Okay, and it looks like that's a hyperlink. Let me see where it goes. Yeah, okay. This is some Homo erectus Acheulean. So you see, they've been intentionally flaked. That is not accident. Okay, we know that it was manufactured.
How can they tell like the age at which the fossil?
Well, they have to have them in the right stratigraphy. Okay, so in some cases they can only estimate, but a lot of the fossils in Kenya, what they look for, first of all, they find them in certain strata, okay, and they hope to find some sort of lava flow. Okay, because if they have that, then they can use radioactive dating for the lava flow.
But not just to like find like how long ago it was, but like how old.
Oh, how old?
The first
Well, your teeth change.
Oh.
Yeah. From layers in your teeth, you can tell how old it is. And even though it's probably not correct to say that they grew or make the assumption that they grow like modern humans, we have plenty of evidence for modern humans. You can age your teeth very easily. Okay, because there's still layers that keep laying down, and you can count them, just like tree rings. So the teeth, they could be studied. But when they compare this also with chimpanzees and gorillas, for example, we know that their teeth probably grew pretty much like ours.
Their teeth were what?
Their teeth grew very much like ours.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Acheulean tools. Some of these, they think, were for scraping meat off of hides. So they may have, although we don't have it, they may have fashioned animal furs. Okay. Furthermore, they're the first hominid to leave Africa. All the other hominids have always been in Africa. So about 1 million years ago, then we start finding these not in the Middle East, but there's a good site in Georgia, not Georgia in the United States, the country in the Caucasus Mountains, that Georgia. A lot of variation, and even by 800,000 years ago in East Asia. So Homo erectus moved real far. Places and they may have used fire. Okay, this is the first evidence of use of fire. We don't know if it was that they found a lightning strike, a forest fire, brought it back for the earth, or were they able to create fire? We don't know, but they definitely used it. They definitely used it, both for warmth and probably for cooking, because animal bones at their sites show signs of being roasted. And furthermore, some of these, especially the ones around Beijing, north of Beijing, unfortunately during the Second World War, those fossils were lost. Fortunately, we still have good casts of them. There's the guy, German, what was his name? Weinberg, don't quite remember. He made real good casts of these. But they were living in pretty cold places for a tropical animal. So they may have used clothing. We don't know for sure. Thought I saw a hand. Okay. All right. Furthermore, these guys were muscular, very muscular. Their bones are very thick. And also, it's very common among them to find broken bones, okay, that had been fractured. Probably they did not have bows, we know they didn't have bows and arrows, so they probably put a lot of their stone points on spears, and they were hunted sometimes big animals, run up and jab it. That's also true of Neanderthals. Okay, so Neanderthals. Sometimes it's put down as a separate species, Homo neanderthalensis, but modern humans and Neanderthals are so close, I would just say that they're different populations, okay? Still distinguishable populations. The thing here is they about 400,000 years, okay? Probably about 400,000. I have 350, up to almost 30,000 years ago. And this is a local, mostly European, Mid-East, and Middle Asia population. Arose from, we have no question, it arose from Homo erectus. Because Homo erectus moved out of Africa, and we have all these different populations of Homo erectus, and Neanderthals happen to locally evolve from earlier Homo erectus populations.
Just like this probably you can't tell anything like this, but like in Neanderthal, or is there any evidence of like religion or anything in Neanderthals? Because like burial is like a ritual thing, right? So
What's that?
burial is like sort of ritual like, right?
Yeah.
So would there be like evidence for any type of religion or evolution and stuff like
There
that?
is for Neanderthals, but not for Homo erectus. Okay, there's no evidence of that. But for here, for example, there's evidence that Homo erectus, Neanderthals buried their dead sometimes. We know that they did that. Furthermore, something that's more human-like is that they obviously took care of older or injured individuals. There's a place in Iran, I think it's called Shanidar Cave, where they have found an old man of 40, okay, which was pretty old for animals like this. But at some time before he died, he received some blow to the head, okay, because his skull is crushed in. He lived through it, but it must have damaged his brain because the opposite side of his body, his arm and leg, are withered, okay, because if you don't use, okay, it's one side of the brain controls the muscles on the opposite side of the body, okay? And so it's crushed on this one side, I don't remember right or left, but the other arm and leg withered, because if they're not taking, if you don't use your muscles, the bone breaks down, okay? So, but the guy was perfectly useless to hunt and defend for himself. So someone had to take care of him, okay? So, and we have a lot of examples of Neanderthals that have broken bone, broken ribs and everything, and they definitely would have been incapacitated, but they lived. Someone took care of them, all right? So that type of stuff is more like human. But they didn't bury the dead. And so that may suggest, because with modern humans, the main reason for burying the dead is not for hygiene or anything, it's for religious purposes. And so they may have had that type. We don't know for sure what they meant by that, by burying the dead, but that's a possibility. Furthermore, Neanderthals would show certain types of artistic ability. We know that they took shells and strung them together on a string, okay, rawhide, for adornment, okay? And so this is something that's more like Homo sapiens is for symbolic expression. Symbolic expression. Now, there was another group here that was very, very surprising, Denisovans, that they were discovered from DNA. Okay, there's a cave in the Altai Mountains in southern Siberia where they excavated a little pinky bone for hand. Now there's a group in Leipzig, Germany, that is called the Max Planck Institute for Anthropological, I don't remember the name, evolutionary anthropology. And the guy who's the main head of it, Svante Pavel, he actually attended UC Berkeley, okay, and in anthropology. Eventually, he moved to Germany and was at the University of Munich, and he developed a lot of ancient techniques to get DNA out of ancient bones. And he was the first one to be able to isolate and get the sequence for Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA. Eventually, he moved to Leipzig at this institute, and now that's their specialty. And so a lot of literature is coming out of this place where they have been able to take and extract ancient DNA. Okay, so there was a cave in the Altai Mountains, southern Siberia. In fact, that's what this is. This is a cave, because there used to be a monk, an Orthodox monk that lived named Denis. We happened to live there, okay? So they call it Denisova. And so they had this pinky bone, extracted DNA, nuclear DNA, okay? And this is about, how old is that? It's over 100,000 years. I'm not real much exact date, I'm not real sure. And they got high-grade DNA out of it. They were expecting it to be Neanderthal, because they already by that time had the complete genome, or almost the complete genome, that they've taken from bones of Neanderthals, or bona fide known Neanderthals, and it turned out that the DNA was different. It was not Neanderthal, but it was a very close relative of Neanderthals. And so right now, what the major hypothesis here is that Homo erectus, that spread everywhere, gave rise to Neanderthals in Asia, and I'll just put it over here, Denisovans. Okay, so that these two are probably sister groups, closely related. Neanderthals range, sometimes it goes from Europe through Central Asia, and sometimes they retracted, and we think that the Denisovans were primarily Central Asia, South Asia. There has recently been another skull that was found in Tibet, in a cave, that we believe is a Denisovan, okay? And they haven't gotten any DNA out of it to verify it, but nonetheless, they have two different sequences of DNA sequence of Denisovans, and they appear to be toward the east. All right? So, not sure how far back they go, not sure where they disappeared, because this is unusual that this is based mostly on DNA, not on, we don't have the skull, except for maybe the one from Tibet, might have a skull there, have to verify what it is. But other than that, we don't have any specimens, skeletal specimens, except for that little pinky from an 11-year-old girl. Okay, we know enough about DNA that we can figure that out. All right, so these are skulls of Neanderthals, and artist rendition of a Neanderthal. They also, as I said, they were very muscular. Skull, okay, the cranial size, larger than modern humans on average. Okay, larger than modern humans on average. These were, full stature, size, like ourselves. Homo erectus was getting there. Homo erectus probably had a skull size of about 600 cubic centimeters. And these Neanderthals is 1,400 cubic centimeters. The average for modern humans, although there's a lot of variation, still the average for modern humans, 1,270 cubic centimeters, right? But there's a lot of overlap. Now, why the large skulls? Probably because muscles, people were trained to do that. Their tool culture is a lot more sophisticated than what Homo erectus had, okay? It's called Malsturian. Okay, Malsturian tools. Homo sapiens, what we belong to. First, anatomically modern humans show up in Africa. Africa, 300,000 years ago. Yes,
Whose tools were the Mousterian tools?
Neanderthals.
Okay.
That's they're more, it involved more sophisticated types of clipping. Okay, they made spear points that they probably put on spears. So this first shows up in Africa, and it probably from Homo erectus. That's probably the relationship. And the DNA sequences of modern humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, they also support this type of relationship as well. Now, some of the significant things here, which are different than from a Neanderthal, anatomically modern, is you don't have the real strong brow ridges. Okay. Now, what those brow ridges are for is for attachment of muscles that control, parts of the face. Why we modern humans brow ridges are not so dominant is because the forehead is higher. Now, so with the Neanderthal, if you looked at it in posterior view, or side view, skull is more like that, whereas with modern human, more like that. So in other words, their skulls are elongated and hence lower, whereas we're not so elongated and we have a high forehead. Yes?
So did the Homo sapiens evolve before the Neanderthals?
Well, we have some fossils down here with common ancestor. And so really what you call that, you don't know. Okay. And here. We know once we get specimens up here with a big divergence that we have these groups. Okay. But yeah, these may have, we think, and this time period here, the ancestor between the split that goes to Neanderthals and Denisovans and Homo sapiens, based on DNA and the assumption of a DNA molecular clock, that mutations happen at a certain rate, we look at different mutations that happen between here, that this ancestor here may have been 600, 800,000 years ago. Actually, this is less likely. Actually, probably 600, 400. We're not real sure. Not real sure. Okay, and so a high forehead and prominent chin. Prominent chin. Why prominent chin? We have a bony chin that sticks out. You look at Neanderthals, there's no chin. Okay, this has everything to do with the size of the teeth. There's teeth of Homo erectus, Neanderthals, big teeth, big jaw, right? So with the technology that came with Homo sapiens, finer tools, better preparation of animals that you're eating, less use of the teeth size have shrunk. And as a consequence, the jaws up here that hold the teeth have sunk backward, leaving this chin sticking out, okay? And in fact, it's still going on. How many of you have had your wisdom teeth taken out? Yeah, we don't have enough room anymore for those last molars to come in, okay? So that's the consequence of being Homo sapien. So this first of all shows up in Africa. And we have several, so here's some showing the difference between the Neanderthals over here and Homo sapiens. Side, Neanderthal, Neanderthal, Homo sapiens. Notice that pretty rounded, not much of a chin, whereas our chin is sticking out here. High forehead. Underneath the back part of, this is called the occipital region of your skull. Actually, occipital region is part of the brain there. It controls vision. But there's real strong, they're called nuchal lines here for attachment of neck muscles. And that's probably why this is sticking out, provided larger area for the attachment of neck muscles. These guys use their teeth a lot, okay? And probably, we don't know why, but even little children, Neanderthals, their teeth are really worn. Mostly they're incisors, so they're probably pulling back like that. It's been suggested that this is how they stretched, maybe stretched hides or so. Definitely they made clothes. They definitely made clothes, although we don't have it. Animal furs of some sort. Okay, now, Homo sapiens. We're the only ones left. Neanderthals are gone. Denisovans are gone. And so, what happened to them? Why did they go extinct? Well, Homo sapiens, we believe, left. Well, let me say that there's two theories about, so I have it here, two different theories that explain modern day Homo sapiens. One that was back in the 1950s and has gradually disappeared is called the multi-regional hypothesis. Obviously, there's regional differences in modern Homo sapiens, okay, skin color and other things. Although we make a big deal of those little tiny differences, these differences, they're really, really quite minor, really quite minor. But nonetheless, the multi-generational, multi-regional idea was that once Homo sapiens spread out of Africa into Asia, into Europe, and other places, is that they independently developed into East Asians, into Europeans, and into, of course, Africans and so forth. And there was enough gene flow between these populations to still maintain the identity of being the same species. Okay, that was the multi-regional hypothesis. And it was, it's sort of been discredited because now what is the most best evidence based on DNA is what's called the out of Africa versus multi-regional hypothesis. Okay, so the multi-regional hypothesis that modern humans evolved in situ from an ancestor, from Homo erectus. I should have said that. They believed that there was that East Asians came from East Asian Homo erectus. Europeans came from European Homo erectus because they were there, and so forth. And that all these regions from Homo erectus independently evolved into modern Homo sapiens because there was enough gene flow between populations. That was the idea. However, the evidence, both based on DNA, primarily based on DNA, is that modern Homo sapiens evolved from an Homo erectus ancestor in Africa first, and starting somewhere between 100 to 60,000 years ago, colonized and left Africa across here and moved through Europe, probably displacing the descendants of Homo erectus, okay, including the Neanderthals. Modern Homo sapiens, first of all, show up in the Middle East about 60,000 years ago. Australia, about 50,000 years ago. In Europe, about 40,000 years ago. And over into the Americas maybe 20,000 years ago, okay? And so the idea here out of Africa, and the DNA really supports it, because we have DNA for Neanderthals. And if the multi-regional hypothesis were correct, then really Europeans and Neanderthals should have very similar DNA. Because the multi-regional hypothesis says Homo erectus evolved in Europe with Neanderthals, which then evolved into modern Europeans. That's not the case. All humans, modern humans, are genetically closer to each other than anyone is to a Neanderthal. There's more differences between the collective genome of modern humans, especially those outside of Africa. The genetic information is really, really similar. We're talking about 99.999% identity, okay? Outside of that, there is more variations genetically in Africa because Homo sapiens have been there for 30,000 years, whereas these out here have colonized it only about 80 to 60,000 years ago. Yes?
Does the multi-regional hypothesis still consider like endorsing each like area as one species because of the gene flow? Or?
Yeah, well, with the multi-regional is like this. We have Homo erectus in Africa. Then Homo erectus ends up in Europe. There's still Homo erectus in Asia, and maybe South Asia. These are still Homo erectus populations. Okay, so Homo erectus populations, and then these evolve into Homo sapiens, these evolve into Homo sapiens, these evolve into Homo sapiens, and there's all these other populations that's the idea.
For them to all evolve into Homo sapiens is very
And that's by modern standards sort of hard to do. Yeah. What the thing is that they were saying there's enough gene flow that they all sort of evolved together. Yeah. But the more plausible hypothesis is not even this out of Africa. It's more complicated than that. Okay. So modern humans displaced. Now, how did they outcompete the descendants of Homo or the Denisovans or the Neanderthals? Did modern Homo sapiens just outcompete them? Did they fight? Did they destroy the Neanderthals? We don't know. Okay, that's not real sure. The fact is that up here, and in many places, we know that there had to be at least 10,000 years of overlap between Homo sapiens and the descendants of Homo erectus. They were there, okay? What is more likely, however, is not the out of Africa, but partly, mostly out of Africa, but also with limited interbreeding. We now, since we have DNA from Neanderthals, Denisovans, we know that outside of Africa, all humans who originated outside of Africa carry anywhere from 1.5 to 3% Neanderthal DNA. We have mutations that we know came from Neanderthals. And so there was interbreeding. Some of it probably happened right here because we have evidence that when that both Homo sapiens and Neanderthals were living in this area about 80,000 years ago. Okay, and that seems to be an very old interbreeding. But even up here, there was a place in Romania where they found an individual in a cave, okay, skeleton, that is Homo sapiens, but they had large chunks of Neanderthal DNA, okay? Large chunks, so such that probably either this individual's grandfather or grandmother was a Neanderthal in Romania. they didn't leave any modern representatives today. Okay, so we do find these skeletons that did interbreed with Neanderthals, but they did not contribute to modern populations.
Did you see that modern populations have 1.5%?
Modern, yeah, today, modern populations of outside of Africa, some inside of Africa because we have back migrations, okay, but they still had an ancestry of having moved out of Africa, that anywhere from 1.5 to 3% of our DNA originated from Neanderthals. The rest of it is all African, okay, we're all from Africa, okay. Now, for Asian populations over here, I don't think mainland, but mostly down here in the ocean area, is that these individuals have about 4% Denisovan DNA. And so they, apparently, modern Homo sapiens, as they moved into these areas, there was interbreeding with Denisovans. And so the idea here now is the really leaky replacement. This is from the journal Science. We got that from the journal Science. But this is the out of Africa model. This is the multi-regional model. But right now, most of the evidence seems to support this, okay? That we did have some interbreeding between Denisovans and Neanderthals where they happened to overlap. Okay.
Comparing the multiracial with the out of Africa, the multiracial, there wasn't anything meaningful, right, among different civilizations? Or like, sorry.
No gene flow. Well, there's obviously gene flow. Yeah.
And then the X represents the extinct Homo erectus, or, sorry.
See, all these originated from African Homo erectus.
Because, of course, in the end, they both became Homo sapiens, right? But I just wanted to know, does the X represent the Homo erectus on the planet?
Where, down here?
No, up there. The X is on the out of Africa one.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's origin for this. It's Homo erectus for both. These are Homo erectus, okay? Or Homo erectus outside of Africa, their descendants, which would be Denisovans and Neanderthals, okay? All right, but this here is more likely. Now, but we know that we have more evidence, as I said, of interbreeding between European Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, but none of those populations left descendants. Okay, they went extinct.
On like the earlier slide, you mentioned that humans and shrimp gorilla DNA is 99% identical.
Yeah, but when you're looking at even 0.1% difference in 6 billion bases, it's still quite a bit. That's major.
So why does the Neanderthal share less DNA?
Share less DNA.
Because you said that the modern humans shared 1.5 to 3%. Are we not talking about modern humans who are not sharing with the shrimps?
Yeah, we're talking about modern humans outside of Africa. Yeah, and it's no more for Neanderthals. It's no more than 3%. It's between, because it depends, because what we had is if we had a mating between a Neanderthal and autonomous modern human, and after that, that child hybrid would be 50% Neanderthal, 50% modern human. Of course, we still have a bunch of stuff both of them. Same thing, all right? It's the different point mutations that are all over the place that we're looking at. Then if this child then only mated with Homo sapiens, okay, that would be what, 4th Neanderthal, and cut that again, cut it again, and so as you go down the line, the amount of Neanderthal DNA becomes less and less. Furthermore, when you first have that first generation hybrid, they have long stretches of DNA that's Neanderthal. But then as that undergoes meiosis, we get shuffling. Meiosis gets shuffling. Meiosis gets shuffling. So consequence is that with time, the amount of DNA from Neanderthals decreases, and also the length of the areas of Neanderthal DNA gets shorter and shorter. Okay, and so we have it scattered throughout all. One thing that's interesting is that a lot of Neanderthal genes or versions of Neanderthal genes that have to do with spermatogenesis, the formation of sperm, seem to be absent. They may not have worked, and they may have been selected against. Okay? All right.
So would interbreeding be like from the female, like a male?
Oh,
second
then,
to the female?
yeah, talking about females. Mitochondrial DNA is only inherited from mother to offspring. Okay? It looks like that with Neanderthals, is that their mitochondrial DNA got replaced by modern humans, Homo sapiens. And so we have older specimens of Neanderthals that have a different type of mitochondrial DNA, but then later ones, they're all their mitochondrial DNA originated from Homo sapiens. So that's sort of the story. Interesting. That's something about anatomically modern humans is quite different than even Homo erectus or other hominids is symbolic representation. And so these are cave paintings from Europe. Some of them are pretty old. Here is a mammoth tusk in which it has a mammoth drawn on it. Okay, so this type of artistic representation showing animals that are no longer there in Europe. Cave lines in Europe, they're not there. Okay, mammoths are gone. And this type of ancient cattle that's not there in Europe either. It's gone extinct. Okay, other things about Homo sapiens is the domestication. And probably the first animal that was domesticated was the dog. And what's interesting about this is most of our plant and animal domestications are for human use, beginning usually 10,000 years ago, when it's called the agricultural revolution. Up to then, we were hunters and gatherers. And so here they intentionally started planting, and of course this influenced the morphology of our crops, because it's due to not natural selection, but now it is artificial selection. Humans have been choosing which seeds, which plants are most useful. But what is interesting about the dog, we know that domestic dogs came from wolves, and European wolves. And the thing is that this probably goes back as far as 30,000 years ago. So it was not agriculturalist. These were hunter-gatherers. And it may have been that the dog domesticated itself, not that the humans did it. Because if we had here some wolves that hung out near human habitats, they could get some scraps. Over time, if they lost sufficient fear of humans, then that changes a lot. There was an experiment here done in Soviet Russia, Soviet Union, a genetics experiment. He wasn't supposed to do this. He was saying that he was breeding these foxes. This guy, I forgot his name, was in Siberia. But he was breeding the foxes for fur. He said that. But he was really doing a genetics experiment, which at that time in Soviet Union was a no-no, because they had different notions of those two natural selection. But he would only breed together foxes that showed less inclination to bite a human. Okay, and over time, as he selected for friendliness, by after about 20 years, you have foxes that were wag their tails, come up with humans. Furthermore, they developed anatomical features such as curly tails, floppy ears, and other things we associate with dogs. Because when you're selecting for less fear, it has a lot to do with hormones. And those hormones have multiple effects, not just on behavior, but also on the anatomy. And that may have been on with dogs as well. You had a question? Okay. Okay, I've driven that in the ground. So this is since then, agricultural revolution is humans have, anatomically moderate humans have just spread all over the place. And rapid increase in the population. Another big change, industrial revolution, back in the just only 200 years ago. And we've arrived in a modern world, which is much, much different than what humans have lived in for most of their evolution. And we're really not too well adapted. We're really not, by our behavior and everything, we're not really too adapted to the new life that we have. And I won't go any further than that. Now, something else. One other specimen of Homo that's very interesting, belonged on the island of Flores in Indonesia. It was discovered maybe about 20 years ago, and it's called Homo floresiensis, and it has a very small brain, and it's only about that tall. Okay, they have several specimens, and they're called the Hobbit, because of their size. Miniaturization, and the best evidence right now is that this is not directly related to Homo sapiens. It was probably a descendant of Homo erectus that ended up on a small, isolated island and evolved into a miniature size. This type of miniaturization on isolated islands is pretty common. There's certain islands where they have fossils of elephants that are about that big, okay, because they have miniaturized, selected for smaller size. Okay. So, very small brain, but they still made tools, stone tools. And they may have been around still 18,000 years ago, okay? I mean, this is the youngest one. They have older fossils that go back maybe 80,000 years or so. Okay, so that's the coverage of hominids. But can we call all of them human? I wouldn't say that Ardipithecus was human. I wouldn't say that that Homo erectus, maybe. Neanderthals, probably, yeah. But what do we mean by human? We like to differentiate ourselves. I think that we really have to come up with some character that makes us different. So one thing is language, okay? We have a very extensive verbally symbolic system we call language, but that's not unique to us. I mean, other animals have a type of language too. And the mental capacity to learn a language. So you could teach chimpanzees sign language, American Sign Language, they've done it before. So we're not unique in that. Tools, we're not unique in that either. Birds, such as crows, they will fashion a little stick to be able to punch into a hole to get termites. Chimpanzees do things like that all the time. And in fact, chimpanzees will make a lot of different tools. Does culture, is that what makes us human? What is culture? And I'm not saying listening to Beethoven or anything like that. That's not what I mean by culture. Culture is the material, an extension of the body. Okay, all the materials that you use, that is an extension of the body for your purpose, whatever purpose, and it is passed down by learning, not by genetics. It has to be learned, okay? So, and taught, okay? That's culture. Well, we're not the only ones who have culture, okay? Some other animals, especially birds, they have to learn, some of them have to learn certain songs. They learn it and, from the parents, and it's passed on non-genetically. Okay, that's culture. Another idea was what's called the theory of mind, trying to make humans absolutely unique. Theory of mind is having a cognitive ability to understand what another individual is thinking. Okay, for example, I'll give you an example of what we mean by theory of mind. If we have an animal or child watching, experimenter comes into the room and he takes a toy of some sort and he puts it in that drawer over there. And then he exits the room Another individual comes in the laboratory, opens that drawer, takes that toy, and puts it in another drawer over there. Okay? And he leaves. Then the first person comes, or no, another one comes in looking for the toy and goes to this drawer where the toy originally was, but the theory of mind says that that individual who is observing all this knows that that toy isn't there. It's over there. Whereas the first person came in looking for it here. Okay, he understands that that person thinks it's here, but it's really over there. That's something like theory of mind. That's not unique to us either. Okay, dogs do this all the time. Okay, and birds, mostly related to crows and jays. Crow, not a crow, but jays primarily. They get acorns and they bury them. They bury them, and they have a fantastic memory of knowing where they put their acorns throughout their environment. If a jay is being watched by another jay, they will plant their acorns and go away. And when the other bird goes away, it comes back and moves all the acorns. Because it knew a jay saw where it buried them. Theory of mind. Okay? And so that's not unique to us either. So one thing about humans, we like to see everything is black and white. It's either this or it's either that, instead of degree. We really differ in degree. Other animals might have language, but nowhere to the extent that we have it. We depend on language. We really depend on language. It's the main way in which our extensive culture is passed on. Okay? So even if other animals make tools, look at the tools we have. Okay? Automobiles, computers, etc. And even 2,000 years ago, the tool culture that humans had is far more excessive than other animals. Other animals, they can live without their sticks. Humans, you take away your tools, we're useless. We probably would go extinct. All right, so it's really a matter of degree, not necessarily a matter of time. Okay, that's a hominid timeline textbook showing you all of our near relatives. And I should have said this before. Darwin's birthday was a few days ago.
Happy birthday, Darwin.
Yeah. Okay, that finishes this. Any slide you want to see? Any questions?
Can you do the ones right before this one?
What's that?
The one right before this one.
Okay, then I'm going to get a start. I didn't mean to spend so much time with humans, but we're sort of interesting critters. Yes?
I want to ask, when you mentioned the Industrial Revolution, you said we're not, like, prepared for...
What's that?
You said, when you mentioned the Industrial Revolution, you said we're not, like, adjusted to the world or something?
Well, yeah, because we've been, for one thing is, well, let's just look at what we call as racism. That's a behavioral characteristic. Most of us identify with smaller number of groups because that's how we evolved. We evolved in small groups, and a lot of times saw other groups as being alien, and it was sort of a type of group selection, because the group worked together for their survival, and some other groups may have been, jeopardized that survival, and we still have a mentality of groups, seeing incredibly small differences in skin color or hair texture, very small differences, and making a big deal out of it because humans evolved in the small groups like that, and that's one of the things I was talking about. But also, all of our we get hernias quite a bit, because of all of our muscles and internal organs. They are attached to our backbone. Okay, not the backbone, but at least the back part of our back. Because most animals are quadrupedal. internal fours. Okay. Okay, whatever. Internal organs, they're attached by and put inside the body. They're all attached by thin layers of connective tissue to the dorsal wall. And we're still that way, except we're like that. And therefore it's very easy, because of now our gravity pulling down, that these things can break. Okay, so that's sort of an anatomical carryover from the past.
Is that like a reason people get a lot of back problems, like lower?
Yeah,
back?
yeah. And we still have back problems, yes.
Is the mesentery like that? Like the connective
That's
tissue?
necessary, yeah. Yeah, that's necessary. Okay, all right, so let's just get a start on this